to this session with Nidhi Singh, who is JSM and SPILS Fellow at Stanford Law School and Counsel at the Supreme Court of India. Nidhi has been enlisted as the top individual lawyer on Forbes India's legal power list in 2022, as well as the most admired global Indians in the 2022 by Passion Vista. And she's also the recipient of many awards, including the Lex Falcon Award for Emerging Lawyers in India in 2022. Now, you can find a link to Nidhi's impressive CV on our event website. And Nidhi today will be sharing a presentation with us about the role of AI technologies in improving the productivity of the Indian judicial system. So our session will last about 20 minutes. So I do not want to take too much of the time already. Warm welcome, Nidhi, and we look forward to your remarks. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ayisha, for having me over and for giving me this opportunity to share some of my research, some of my work that I've been doing on artificial intelligence and its role in improving the productivity of the Indian judicial system. A lot of it is at a nascent stage, but it'll be helpful to share some of the findings that I have gathered through various forums and through various research and through various interviews. So the idea of, this is sharing of experience that I have in terms of the role of artificial intelligence technologies in improving the productivity of the Indian judicial system is that I would like to first start with giving you a brief background about what Indian judiciary looks like for the international audience, and it'll be helpful to get some sort of an idea with respect to that. So if you look at the judicial delays, which is not only very, I would say, sacred to India, but it's something where you see it up in many jurisdictions. And eventually, when I proceed, I will be taking some examples also from the US courts to give you a comparative analysis. Now, if you look at the judicial delays and backlogs, they have as such plagued the access to justice in India. And when I was trying to conduct a research on this, trying to do an empirical study, I wanted to examine whether the AI technologies which have been introduced or adopted since 2019 by the Indian judiciary has somewhat improved the overall judicial productivity. I tried to assess this by calculating the ratio of the judges to the number of case disposals that they were doing per year before and after the adoption of the AI technologies. Tried to identify a little bit the challenges that the judiciary faces to address the problem of the backlog of cases. And what were the globally available AI technology that were equipped enough to address the problems of you can say the problem of backlog cases with the help of technology prevalent in India. Now, to be very briefly, if you look at India has a population of around 1.4 billion people, a sixth of the world's largest population. Therefore, it comes no surprise that more than 47 million people, more than 47 million cases are pending across various Indian courts, be it the lower courts, the district courts. And if I quote the data from the National Judicial Data Grid, it says that around 41 crore 979,353 cases are pending before various district and subordinate courts. So even before I begin how the AI can apply, AI is the need for the Indian judiciary at the moment to reduce the backlog of cases. What is the reason for this judicial pendency is also because the judges to population ratio is quite low. There are not enough judges to hear and decide cases. And if I quote the Indian Justice Report of 2020, India has approximately one judge per 50,000 citizens. And moreover, some states like Bihar, West Bengal, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, these are some of the eastern states in India, which have almost one judge for every 1 lakh citizens. So you can imagine the how burdened the judiciary is which also affects the overall administration of justice as well. And if you look at the case management thing in India, so for a considerable number of cases that you look at, there is an inadequate preparation by the lawyers also, which results in adjournments or delays, or somewhat an inefficient utilization of a judge's time, and cognitive resources that result in the overall judicial productivity as such. And there is also a problem, that the property rights in India as such are not very well defined, and a considerable number of cases concerned to that. So the problem of the backlog of cases keeps increasing. Now, given this background, what is it that India is doing to solve this problem with the usage of the AI technology? Some examples that I want to bring to your notice today is that Supreme Court has launched an AI system in 2019, and this is Supreme Court of India I'm talking about, to improve the access of justice. Now, the system which they launched it was called the Supreme Court's Vidhi Anuvad software, which is also called the SUVAS software. The idea is that the system is trained to translate English judicial documents or orders and judgments into 9 vernacular languages and scripts and vice versa. So this is one step in this regard. The other step is that the Supreme Court portal for assistance in court efficiency, which is called also the SUPACE, SUPACE, it was launched very recently, like last year in 2021. Now, this software that I'm talking about, it was designed as such to understand the judicial process that requires some sort of an automation. So what it basically does is that it assists the courts in improving the efficiency, or you can say productivity, by collecting the relevant laws, the legal acts, the statutes, and the facts, and they make it available to the judges who sit on the bench. What this basically does is that it helps the judges reduce the workload. So SUPACE does not decide the case. Therefore, the judges will have the full discretion and autonomy to decide the case in a somewhat faster pace. But this is an aid to, you can say, to improve the judicial productivity in India. Now, very briefly now, if we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, we know that it's an adaptive computer program which can perform functions that is typically associated with the human mind, and it offers some sort of a new opportunities for improving the productivity of large-scale organization. And the recent advances in the data collection, or you can say the system aggregation, algorithms, all of this processing power have transformed the computers from machines that perform, say, a rigidly defined task, to machines that can learn even without supervision and adapt to new inputs as such, you can say, without the need to be reprogrammed. So the idea is that AI offers a myriad number of ways to improve the justice system. And the large volume of data from surveillance system that you would want to collect, or for that matter, the digital payments for platforms, the newly computerized bureaucratic systems, and even the social media platforms, all of this can be analyzed to, detect the anomalous activity, or you can say investigate the potential criminal activity and improve the system of justice. AI systems, if you look at in improving the access to justice, what I found that is that it can reduce the barriers to also accessing courts by providing, say, users like you and I with a timely information that directly, rather than you going through the channel of the lawyers. For example, in the United States, the AI is already used in processing of bail applications, DNA analysis of crimes, gunshot detection, and even crime forecasting. And very quickly, in brief, I want to give you example of United States. Uh, if you look at the way, the applications have been processed in the US courts, for example, it finds that for instance, the tone of words used in the first 3 minutes of a hearing, or say for that matter, the incidence of birthdays, the outcomes of sporting events, and even the time of a day of a hearing, all of this affect the outcome of the cases. And these methods can actually identify both the conscious and the unconscious bias. The analysis of, say, around 20,000 judicial rulings collected over 77 years period of time by the 12 US circuit courts. All of this, they illustrate that the judges demonstrate somewhat considerable bias before the national elections. Similarly, there is also, and this is not something which is very absurd, because the fact that the US Constitution does not have a provision for appointment for judges, rather it's more of a political appointment. So this comes as a no surprise, even with the usage of AI, when you come across this finding. Similarly, there is new evidence that suggests that sequencing matters in high stakes decisions or decisions made on previous cases that also affect the outcome of the current cases, even though the cases have nothing to do with each other. So somewhat even the US judiciary, which has been quite proactive in using this application, there is some sort of a bias that you see in the rulings, which also has some sort of the negative consequences of having usage of AI in the judicial system. Very quickly, coming to the Indian judiciary, to give you a comparative study in that respect. In the past 15 years, if you see, the considerable efforts have been made to adopt and deploy information technology court systems in India. One of the most significant projects was the e-courts project that was launched in India in 2005, even before the 2019 and the 2021 example that I gave you a couple of minutes ago. And the Supreme Court of India adopted this e-courts policy through the National Policy and Action Plan for Implementation of Information and Communication Technology in the Indian judiciary. The idea was that the e-court initiatives, introduced technology in the courtroom. So this was one of the first interactions when the judges were told to be court-friendly, judges were told to be technology-friendly in courts. And what I've been told, and the way what I have been told in many forums, lawyers and judges are more always averse to technology because we all like reading in paper. So we hate technology. And the most obvious and observable feature of the system of this e-courts when it was introduced was the deployment of the technology within the court itself. So the judges now in India were provided with LCD screens, touch screens, or projectors that were connected, say, via a local network to disseminate information to the lawyers. Electronic boards were displayed to queue the number of cases. So all of this, was one of the initial stages in which the way the e-system was introduced in India. But if you look at the data on the judges and whatever the findings I could find in terms of research, in order to better understand the impact of these specific judges, usage of AI is, in terms of judicial making, is more helpful. Once their identity, the training, the experience, all of it is there available in the database. And we try to construct somewhat a database of judges for the courts of India. So the idea is that you extract data from the judges' handbooks, which has been released by the Supreme Court of India, or the information from various high courts' website. And, the data that, you come across is that are approximately 93.5% of the judges are males and 6.5% are females. And their collective experience somewhat covers approximately 70 years of the experience of the ever since independence. The legal data which is released by all of these judges, or for that matter, the Indian judiciary, is voluminous, it's messy, it's complex. So cleaning and the pre-processing of the data is critical for any form of analysis that you would want to do, especially, so for, say, for supervised algorithms, trained on this data. So the traditional empirical legal studies have typically addressed this issue by relying on a small scale of data sets, where legal variables are somewhat manually coded. And when you go on to examine this data in terms of the scope of the Indian judiciary, it's quite huge, it's voluminous. So it's one of the biggest challenging is pre-processing the data and the availability and the variability of the reporting across states and districts. So that becomes quite a challenge. In terms of if I talk about the identification of the laws and the acts, the legal texts do not currently employ any standardized citation for referring to acts or laws. So, for example, if I have to quote the Hindu Marriage Act, it may be referred to in a variety of ways. So, some people would try to search as under Section 3, Clause 2 of the Hindu Marriage Act, or some people would try to search as under Section 13, Clause B of the Hindu Marriage Act, or rather than writing the term Clause B, they would put the Clause B in bracket. So again, machine learning tools can also be used to address this issue. So the idea is that, when you're working on a topic like this, the idea is that you have to use a set of tools that create some sort of a mathematical representation of the text in the form of, you can say, vectors. So the term frequency or the inverse document frequency is one such popular method which you can use to represent a string of words, which can act as a vector of scores that reflect how frequently a word is used within a text and how infrequently it appears in the corpus. So the identification of specific laws and acts, it opens up new opportunities for legal analysis. And we can, for example, compare, the types of cases that come across India, and it takes how much time it takes to process them. So this is critical in being able to understand where the biggest delays in system come from and how they may be resolved. There is obviously, just like the comparison that I gave you from the United States and how AI is also somehow disadvantageous at times, there are also concerns in India when it comes to stereotyping and discrimination in the courts. And typically, it cite a single case or say a small set of cases to highlight the issue. Bias is shown by the courts or even a single judge is difficult to identify and is to be analyzed rigorously. But this challenge is, of course, not unique to judiciaries. This exists across bureaucracy as well. It is something which is not very peculiar to one profession. So the idea, to conclude my talk is that, the idea is that, any sort of building such algorithms, it requires a feature rich data set, typically consisting of variables that include the litigant characteristics, you can say the caste, the gender, the location, the type of the crime committed, the lawyer characteristics, the court characteristics, the case details, where you are required to fill the details, the evidence required, or say the additional characteristics like date, year, date of birth, and even for that matter, case outcomes, such as your granting of bail or dismissal of a case. So, and the idea is that an algorithm builder would write a learning procedure that would aim to provide a somewhat a predicted outcome from a broad range of inputs, choosing from a variety of models with support vector machines or decision trees or the Bayesian networks and neural networks. The architecture of all these models, feature multiple sequential layers of intermediate variables that eventually go on to connect the input features, or you can say the output classes. So all of these models stand a sharp contrast to the traditional statistical methods, such as the linear regression we use. So the idea is that all of this is at a quite a nascent stage, and there's a need to identify the loopholes in a lot of way to identify the causal effect of the legal rulings, randomizing cases to judges, has been predicted to be quite harsh or lenient. It generates some sort of an inference on the long run causal impacts on the length of the sentences also being given by the judges. So there are various issues to that, but overall, the system needs to be better understood, and the Indian judiciary is on the way to it, but it's quite new. The better the data sets are built and the better the keywords are used, I feel that it could be used to address a lot of problem, and a new relationship between the human and machine can be effectively utilized in judiciary by using various economic tools, like even the randomized controlled trials, for which Professor Duflo won the award. So I think this is it from my end.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Nidhi, because I'm just aware of the time, and I was thinking that, first of all, I think my takeaway is all the positives that you have outlined and how we can approach this. You talked about the reduction in the backlog, the less workload for the judges. But I think one that I quite like is that sort of almost a positive externality being the fact that, there's actually, it's moving towards the digitalization of the judiciary. Whilst we don't have time, and I will still ask you one question, which you have about a minute to answer, because that brings us to this. And you also talked about, of course, the issue of the magnification of biases. And I'm assuming that that's something, whilst it happens everywhere, probably also is a concern in India too. The question is, to what extent are the judges, trained, understanding, and educated about all of this? So they've been sort of asked by the Supreme Court, use these apps, go this way. Is there also a program which is in place to basically, in a way, make them also feel comfortable to complement their work with AI? You have 1 minute only to answer, and then we got to go. But I just thought I'll ask you whilst we have you here.
So definitely there are training programs which is conducted even for the beneficiaries across government sectors in India, not only in judges. So it goes without saying that the judges also being the holders or, the providers of justice in any democracy, the training is imparted to them through various government functionaries. And the Supreme Court of India itself, it conducts a lot of legal training programs in terms of training in the technological aspects of usage of these softwares. So judges do get the training. There's no doubt about that. And it's provided by the technical experts in India.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was really fascinating. Thank you, Nidhi, for this overview.